911. What's the location of your emergency?
Oh my God.
Problem.
What's the problem, ma'am? Okay, your neighbor's laying on the floor with blood everywhere. Is he...
What? There's blood.
Ma'am, is he breathing?
I don't know. Not a...
Okay. He said there's blood all over?
Oh, there's blood all everywhere.
Okay. Just stay outside there. We've got help on the way.
Oh my God.
Akron, Ohio officers raced to the location of the call, a house in a residential part of town.
I was dispatched that afternoon. I was one of the first officers on scene. When I got to the scene, I activated my body camera. The notes stated that there was a neighbor that had found a man laying upstairs, and there was an enormous amount of blood everywhere.
The back door's unlocked. It's never unlocked. And I see that, his door is open right here. All his cupboard doors are open in the kitchen, and that's not normal.
You want to go hang out over there for us so you can bring the work here?
Yeah, at first, we didn't know what we were dealing with. After getting up to that second level, you could see the enormous amount of blood everywhere. It was all around the victim. When you see that amount of blood, to say it was gruesome would be an understatement.
Upon arriving on scene, the Akron Fire paramedics gave the uniform officers a statement as to what they suspected happened.
Like murder? This is either suicide or murder. Okay. Because there's blood all over the wall, I'm gonna guess the latter, but you can take a look yourself.
I then made my way upstairs to the second floor hallway to assess the situation.
Oh, where's his injuries at? I don't know. I have not touched him. All I did was touch him to see if he was stiff, but he's stiff and cold. So we're calling it obvious. Yeah, I'm not gonna move him. We'll let the me. Okay.
Initially examining him in the hallway, it was a mystery as to what happened. But then when we went into the bedroom and saw that there was blood in the bed, on the sheets, and then on the wall, you could see blood spatter, which is indicative of knife wounds.
He has some significant injuries to both, not only his upper body, his head area, but also his hands as well. We were able to actually confirm within a short time of being on scene that we were looking at a homicide investigation.
Start a crime scene log, get a hold of DB, and get somebody out here. Yeah. All right, one of you guys want to call DB, and then
I'll call him.
We searched the entire house.
Like all the cabinets here are open.
The kitchen cupboard doors were wide open, all of them.
I mean, who does this?
It was truly a bizarre scene. It all kind of fit that someone came in, robbed him of something, and killed him.
My thoughts were just based on the fact that this was a brutal stabbing. We thought maybe we were looking for a little bit more personal story, a personal motive, and revenge is certainly a motive when you have a case like this.
Detectives turned their attention to the 911 caller, who identifies herself as Sarah Evans, a neighbor of the victim.
Dead, isn't he?
That's
Oh my God.
What's that?
Look at him. What's his name?
1 second. Make some pictures from me real fast.
Oh my God, I live right here.
What is his name?
Benjamin King.
Benjamin King?
Uh-huh.
I was very proud of my father. We'd sit and talk. And then I would go to his house probably every 2 weeks to help him out over there. And we would just sit while he watched Wheel of Fortune. He made sure I was safe. He was a very good-hearted person. And then I got the call and they told me he was murdered. By that point, I done broke down.
Back at the scene, investigators continue questioning Sarah. to learn more about their victim.
She was a good friend of Benny. She lived just a few doors down. She would go and check on him every day, practically.
For like 20 years. I've lived here for 3.
On this particular day, she went up late morning to check on him. The front door was locked and discovered that the back door was unlocked. She went in and called for him, checked on him, and discovered his body upstairs.
Detectives then ask Sarah if she can think of anyone who might have wanted to harm Benjamin.
She told us about 2 brothers, Justin and John. They were frequent visitors to the house.
Last night Justin was over here. He was with Johnny. Benny didn't want him there, and Benny come down with his gun. So,
You got a gun in there?
what I've been told, I don't know.
So who just confirmed all that?
I don't know. There's a lot of stories flying. I don't know what.
We learned that Justin had a pretty bad drug problem, so he was always looking for something, always looking for money, for handouts. Benny loaned him some property that I think he believed Justin had pawned for money for drugs. Their arguments had turned pretty serious and pretty intense to where he did, I believe, draw a gun. So there was definitely a history there that looked a little more serious. We thought Justin and John could have broke into that house and been responsible for the murder. One of the things we do during any investigation is to see if there's any other witnesses that may have seen something that could be pertinent to the case.
Officers speak with other neighbors who report seeing a vehicle near the crime scene earlier that day.
On my parents' porch, and I saw this goldish, older style Hummer, big body Hummer, speed away from over here. I didn't hear no noises like gunshots or anything.
Okay.
But
How about what time what was that?
Probably 10:30, 11ish.
Did you happen to see who was driving?
A white male.
Okay.
One of the neighbors said the Hummer came screeching in, went towards Benny's house, stopped, and then 10 to 15 minutes later, it came screeching back past him. We didn't, at that point, know like an exact time of death. However, it's credible that there was a Hummer on the street around the time of death.
So fast his tires were squealing.
Okay.
It didn't click to him at first, but then when we showed up and discovered the murder, he said that was the first thing that he thought of was that Hummer.
Okay. All right, brother?
Yep.
Another neighbor then reveals a new piece of information. Justin, the man with whom Benjamin was having trouble, drives a Hummer.
So you're just assuming Jaybird being connected to a Hummer.
Right.
We learned that Justin went by Jaybird, and that's what the neighbor was using.
I know that I've seen him many times with
a Hummer?
Yeah, Hummer.
What color?
What that truck? It's like a dusty gold like that.
So you've seen Jaybird driving this golden Hummer?
Before, yeah.
The spotting of the Hummer raised our interest in Justin. 10 to 15 minutes is definitely enough time to commit a murder. He was definitely a suspect that we needed to talk to. So at this point, I thought I had good leads as to what happened. The mystery was deepening.
And one of the things we do in investigation is we notify family members as soon as possible. It's called a death notification. And a lot of times that is critical to a case because the family might know something. Who better than family members to tell you who they're having problems with?
Benny's daughter, Patricia, was notified. She showed up with her husband. When she went from emotionally upset to angry,
Did you talk to that down there?
Immediately, Patricia tells investigators she thinks she knows who's responsible for her father's murder.
She actually talked quite a bit about Miss Evans. She did not appreciate Miss Evans' involvement in her father's life.
That lady down there has been paying his bills, and she's been taking all his money. So I don't have a bill to say because she's not giving him the bills. She's keeping them. She is writing on the receipts what she is supposed to pay versus what she really paid.
And Patricia felt like she was taking advantage of her dad. Apparently there was a relationship where she would take care of paying his bills for him. And there were some allegations that Miss Evans was kind of scamming off of him when she was doing this.
She took upon herself to help him. And that's her way is by taking his money. And his money fund still be in there because I know exactly where it's at. It's in a cabinet in his kitchen and a coffee cup.
I was asking her about why would someone kill her father. She mentioned a coffee can of money. She told me that that her father told her that he had close to a couple $1,000s in the can.
We escorted her inside and she took us directly where the can was.
Oh. It was in the car. It's in like this.
Was it in there?
No, it's in a container like this.
It
was in here.
It was missing.
So whoever did this knows exactly where he is went. And she's one, and Johnny, those are the two that come down here. Those two are the suspects. I'm telling you, there's nobody else. Them two.
Now, the daughter told us John knew where he kept his cash, also raised our suspicions even more. His brother had been seen in his vehicle and it's stopping where the crime happened. So we made that a priority to try to locate him. We got an address for John. I went directly there to his house. When you make initial contact with people, especially when you're investigating a homicide, you kind of gauge what their initial reaction is.
Do you go over and see him quite often?
Yep, sure do. Go over and drink a beer with him just about every day.
Okay. So you last saw him yesterday about 7:30 in the evening? Or?
Yeah, what's this all about?
He's dead.
You gotta be kidding me, dude.
No, I'm not. That's why I'm here.
And his was one of surprise. I thought of genuine surprise and emotion. He was genuinely shocked about what happened. He was very open about his brother. Even acknowledged that there were some problems between his brother, Justin, and Mr. King.
He told him, look, get away from my house. Don't you ever come back again. He said, I've loaned you money 4 or 5 times. I'm on a fixed income here. I can't just keep giving.
Yeah. He physically pushed him?
Oh, yeah.
But didn't think his brother had anything to do with his murder.
Police can't overlook reports that John's brother, Justin, was seen at the crime scene shortly before the murder.
It was very important to find Justin because he had some animosity toward King. He was in the area that morning, so we definitely needed to get face-to-face with Justin at that point.
152, car number 2.
Detectives issue an APB for Justin, and 19 hours after the murder, he's located and brought in for questioning.
Hey, Justin. Sergeant Sarvati.
Obviously, he knew why we wanted to talk to him. And I did at that point, I was certainly suspicious. I'm suspicious of everybody. I was thinking that something's going on here. I could just tell if he's not telling me the truth. And we were very interested, obviously, in his whereabouts, for the past 48 hours relating to Mr. King's death.
So, how do you know him? What is your relationship with him? Can you kind of take us through that?
My brother, Mr. King, I've known each other for over 30-something years. I just grew up as a kid going around Mr. King. He was more or less like a stepfather, pretty much.
How so?
I mean, he was a guy that just bought cars and, never shook a stick at giving you $1 or a cigarette or something to eat, or, you know what I mean? I lived next door to him there for probably, maybe 4 or 5 months.
We listened intently to see if what he's saying matches with any of the facts.
So we talked to everybody in the neighborhood, and they basically said the same thing with Benny, that he was a walking saint, except for one person that they said he banned from the house.
Was me.
Is it over money?
Yeah, it was over money. I was with my brother at his house. I told you he was drinking beer with over there.
He say anything about a shotgun?
Yeah, he did. He told my brother, he's like, I should take my shotgun down there, pump a couple of the twids in it.
Justin did confirm about his confrontation with Benny and the fact that he was kicked out and banned from Benny's house. But Justin did deny murdering Benny King.
If you're asking, did I kill Mr. King? No.
You did not?
No, I did not.
We asked him, okay, if you didn't do it, what do you think happened?
It's then Justin reveals a name already familiar to investigators. Sarah Evans, the neighbor who discovered Benjamin's body.
His door is open right here. All his cupboard doors are open in the kitchen, and it's not normal.
He mentioned, well, look, she's over there almost every day, and he told us that she was scamming him, saying that his bill was a certain amount, forcing him to overpay.
The only thing that my brother John was talking about was the girl down at the edge of the corner at the Grain Corner house. She knew, she took Ben's bank card to the bank, food stamps. That's what my brother was telling me on the phone the other day. And he thinks that she might have had something to do with it. So if I'd point a finger, I'd probably check her for sure.
Now, with the daughter, what she told us, that Miss Evans was scamming him, we had to look at, different suspects. But at that point, I wasn't discounting the possibility that we were looking at the killer. We had a deep mystery on our hands. We were trying to get as much information, looking at all angles, but we were no closer to solving Mr. King's murder.
This case was becoming a whodunit. We had a lot of finger pointing, but there was really no concrete evidence. It was very mysterious at this point.
We had further questions. Now that we knew a little bit more about Mr. King, we wanted to ask Sarah Evans about what was going on with these scam allegations. She was a definite suspect, so we brought her in for what we consider a formal questioning.
We understand that he would pay his bills.
Well, that's where we had a dispute, but it wasn't between, I don't think it was between me and him, it was me and his daughter. I went to pay his bill. One bill, I didn't pay $40 on it. I needed to borrow that. He said, go ahead, did not remember. I paid him back his $40. That's why I was still wrong with him.
What kind of bill?
It was, electric bill. That I paid $40. I paid for 40 taxes when I only got paid. You know, I was in stretch with my bills too. But I take it back. That's why I was up there.
Then when you weren't there?
Just wanted his daughter to go pay the bills, and I also didn't have a problem with that.
I was unsatisfied with her response, but I needed to see if there was anything that she could remember that she didn't tell me the day of the murder.
Detectives press Sarah on anyone else who knew Benjamin. She tells police about her son.
Sarah gave me a little history of her son, Jason Shockley. She said that he had emotional problems, he was a drug addict, trouble with the law.
He's got out of prison and stuff, so
When did he get out of prison?
in September.
What was he in jail for?
Robert.
When I point blank asked her about her son, Jason, her whole body language changed. She became very uncomfortable.
Would your son be capable of doing something like this?
Oh God, I would pray not. No, I would pray not.
After that response, it's all started to click in a way. My belief that she knew about the coffee can, but her denial, I think what was going through her mind was, oh my God, I think I might have mentioned that, and Jason knew about it. and his propensity to rob people and his addiction. She probably was thinking, oh my God, it is possible. Now all the puzzle pieces are starting to fit, and we have a new suspect.
Detectives set out to locate Jason Shockley. It's then they receive surprising new information that could crack the case wide open.
We had an inmate who was in the Summit County Jail call us and said that he had overheard a conversation that Jason Shockley made while he was in jail with him about Mr. King, directly relating to why it happened.
So I'm told, you told one of the deputies, you got some information about a homicide?
It's about the old guy that got stabbed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, his mother found the body. Everybody in the neighborhood know the kid did it. His son, her son.
Okay. How do you know this?
He called me. Well, I seen him a couple days after it happened. He told me everything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then I heard him and his mom arguing on the phone. It wasn't going to go that far. Because she always going over the house cleaning up when she been doing that for years.
Mm-hmm. This was a big break as far as what the inmate told us, but again, it was hard to prove. We had no evidence from the murder.
We have all this information. Jason Shockley is our #1 suspect. It was imperative that we find him.
Meanwhile, a family reflects on their lost loved one.
Growing up, it was just me and my sister. We didn't see eye and eye together at all. But in my dad's eyes, I was perfect. I didn't do no wrong. He wanted the best for me. He wanted to make sure that I was well taken care of. He wanted to make sure that I did everything I wanted to do growing up. I was always sheltered, so I didn't get to go out and do a lot of things. He made sure I was safe.
Akron Police and Fire, Canty.
Hi, my name is George Bayless. I'm down in Florida now, but my father's still up in Akron. We haven't been able to get a hold of him, and some of his neighbors got a hold of me today, too, and said they haven't seen him since Saturday. They said there were some people over there they didn't really recognize.
Alright, so we have it in. We're going to get someone over there to check it out, and then we can give you a follow-up call.
The caller was George Bayless. He's the son of Gary Bayless, requesting officers go out and check on his father, who he hadn't heard from in about a week. The patrol officers, they arrive, they activated their body cameras. At this time, it's pretty late at night, just before midnight. After they knocked several times, nobody answered, they forced open the driveway side door.
Gary! Akron Police! Gary, it's Akron Police! Gary!
And when they went into the house, they found Gary Bayless deceased in the living room. When we arrived on scene, it was pretty clear that we had a mystery. All we had was a deceased male with multiple stab wounds to his chest and his neck. It was pretty clear, based off the odor and the condition of the body, that he had been dead for at least a few days.
My dad was very bright, caring, fun. He loved his family, and He liked to take us to dinner, museums, vacations, a lot of educational things we did together. He was very much opposed to people being treated unfairly. He was big into civil rights. He would give me the day off school on May 5th every year because we would be at Kent State for the memorial for the 4 students killed on May 4th there. He always instilled in me to treat people kindly, not to judge them. Overall, he was just very kind to people, almost to a fault. I called the police and asked them to do a welfare check. I just had a feeling. I told my wife, I said, you know, if they put a detective on the phone, then he's not there anymore.
Detectives begin examining the crime scene for clues.
This is going to be probably a homicide by stabbing, and they took his car most likely. So I got 22 working on a bolo. I'm going to try to get another car here or two so we can start doing a canvas.
Officers fan out and begin speaking with neighbors.
All the neighbors in the area spoke very highly of Gary, said he was an extremely nice gentleman, that he had visitors over there from time to time, but lately they seen a gentleman that had been there. They weren't sure if that was related to anything, but that was the last person that they seen leave Gary's house.
Sunday, I think it was Sunday that we saw him with some guy that had a cane. Have you seen a guy with a cane before? No. Nope, never seen him before. Yeah, and then they got in the car and left on one period, but that's the last I've seen. Got in what car? Gary's? Gary's, yeah.
When I heard the description of a white man with a cane, my initial thought was that it was probably an older gentleman walking with a cane, and not to mention that our victim was in his late 60s as well. So it was a possibility that, you know, that gentleman could be responsible for the murder of Gary Bayless.
Detectives then received word that Gary's missing car was spotted within the last few days.
We put the bolo out on Gary's car the night of the incident. We had learned that the vehicle went to several different gas stations, several of them in the area. So another detective was able to obtain video from the gas stations from May 16th of 2020. The videos just had the suspect with the victim's vehicle.
Unfortunately, investigators aren't able to identify the driver. But then, hours later, a witness comes forward with information on a potential suspect. And it's a name they've heard before.
Our witness had stated that he worked with Jason Shockley, and he had picked him up in that car, and they went and worked on a job site together.
Jason came over Saturday morning. He was going to help me work on the house I'm working on. He said, "Oh, I'll take you." And I said, "Wait a minute, Jason." I said, "I'm not getting in no hot car." I said, "Is that car hot?" He said, "No, the car's not hot." You know, I wouldn't do you like that. The car's not hot. He said, "My friend let me use it. He went to Florida."
What kind of car was it? You said it's a bluish car?
It's a bluish color. I don't even know what kind of car it is, but I know what I saw. And when I read that description of the car, I put 2 and 2 together.
Okay. To see if he's definitely the one that was involved in our homicides. We did a photo lineup. It has 6 photos to see if he could pick out our suspect.
That's it. Yes, right here.
Okay, so you go ahead and take the picture out the top. And on the back, have you sign it, and then put down the percentage. And then just put the percentage. Okay.
I know that's him.
He did pick out Jason Shockley.
We have all this information. Jason Shockley is our #1 suspect. It was imperative that we find him.
Jason was a danger to our community, and at this point he was unpredictable. We didn't know if Jason would kill again. We knew we had to get him off the streets as quickly as possible.
Then, on May 22nd, One day after the murder of Gary Bayless, detectives receive a call from Jason Shockley's mother, Sarah.
She was very emotional. She was concerned about her own safety, putting herself in danger by giving us this information. And that's why I think she was telling us exactly where to locate him, because Jason was so unpredictable.
I went to the house. There were several uniformed officers, Lieutenant Wynn and myself. At this point, we thought Jason would be armed and dangerous. We made entry through an open window on the front porch. When making a dynamic entry, you're trying to get in as many people as quickly as possible, and then covering all angles of a possible attack.
Hands! Don't move. Roll over and put them on the top of your head. Roll on your stomach, hands are behind your back. Let's go! Hurry up, Jason. Right, I got you.
When we apprehended Jason, we found Gary Bayless's credit cards on him, so we knew we had our guy. We arrested him and brought him into the police station.
When Jason was brought into the interview room, he was in there for quite a while before we actually went in and talked to him.
After you went talking to detectives.
When we put somebody in an interview room, the cameras start immediately. We watch their body language, see how they're acting.
All right, so I'm Detective Kennedy. This is Sergeant Salati. I'm investigating an incident that happened the other day. How do you know Gary Bayless?
Just a few days ago, me and him was putting flowers off of bushes and he was taking around to the neighbors.
Like, how long ago was that? Today's Friday.
When we confronted him about Gary Bayless and Benny King, he actually spoke highly of both of them, said he wouldn't do anything to hurt them.
When I see him out and about, hey Gary, how you doing? Or I go over, step up on him like, hey, how you doing today, Gary?
Pretty early on in the interview, we knew he was lying, so we just had to kind of let everything play out.
And Benny accused him of a skimming money, which really wasn't skimming. Like, he forgot that he told her she wanted $40. I used to go with her right up there to book door when she paid his bill.
Jason, all I'm telling you is that points to you.
It's not going to point to
you. You are.
It's not going to point to me. It can't point to me. That's what I'm saying. It can't point to me. I didn't do nothing to him.
It was definitely a mystery from the get-go. We did have the information about the gentleman with the cane. So early in the interview, he indicated that he walks with a cane. Right then, it kind of clicked that, hey, this is the guy that the neighbors seen leaving Gary Bayless's house. After Jason denied killing both men, we started to break him down.
You know, Jason, you can deny it, deny it. And when it goes to court, it goes to a jury, and the judge hears all, and they convict you, you're going to get more time than if you do something. Tell us what happened.
And I said to him, we've sat here this whole entire time, and you talk about how much you care about Gary. And I said, there's one question you never asked me that somebody that cares about somebody so much usually asks right away. How did it happen? You never asked that. And I'm like, the reason you never asked that is because you're the one who did it. He looked at me and he asked me to turn off my digital recorder.
You want me to turn it off? Stop. erase the first key. I'm not erasing anything.
I'm saying, if you erase the first one, I'm gonna tell you what we're gonna have.
There, it's completely off. But tell me what really.
The only reason I did that is because I knew that the video in the room was still being recorded. So once I turned off the recorder and told him I wasn't going to erase it, he decided to tell us actually what happened to Gary Bayless.
He's over there drinking wine and stuff, smoking. And I guess my mom had borrowed $20 from him.
Okay.
He got to talking real crazy about him.
Okay.
I asked him, like, Gary, please stop. So, I'm like, you know what, I gotta go. I get up and leave, and he broke his cup at me. And it had wine in it. He picked up his knife, and it was just like, I just turned around real quick.
What happened to him?
I pushed him down, dropped the knife, and I took the knife. That's exactly what kind of freaked me out. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, then when I pushed him down in the chair real quick, like, he dropped the knife, I picked up the knife. He was like, shoot you, and that's when I just blacked out and must have stabbed.
So when you stabbed him, you stabbed him with the right hand or left? Are you right-handed?
I'm right-handed.
As the puzzle pieces finally start to fit, detectives press Jason on the murder of Benjamin King.
I started questioning him about Benny King. He adamantly denied it.
Everything you told us about Gary, I think it happened with Benny.
I didn't do Benny.
Everything we had for the Benny King homicide was all circumstantial, but it was pretty strong circumstantial evidence. It was almost like a mirror between the two cases. Too many similarities to deny that he was involved in both.
We knew that Jason Shockley knew Benny because of his mother. I think Jason found out about the coffee can and the money. He went in, he looked for the coffee can, he found it. He went upstairs, Benny woke up. I think he started fighting with Jason. Jason just started stabbing him. Benny stood up, went out to the hall, collapsed and died.
We also knew Jason and Gary were spending some time together and drinking wine. He asked Gary to use the car. I'm assuming that Gary refused that. It upset Jason, and that's when he shoved Gary to the ground and ended up stabbing and killing Gary in order to try to get some money. We did not find the murder weapon for the Gary Bayless or the Benny King homicide.
Jason Shockley is convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the murders of Benjamin King and Gary Bayless.
Both cases, Benny and Gary's, were a whodunit from the start. With Benny's, we had no real evidence. With Gary, it was days after we discovered his body. It was mysterious as to who and why anyone would do this, other than the fact of what Jason did after Gary's murder. I don't think that these would have been solved.
Through these cases, unfortunately, under these circumstances, you just get to meet some great people in the worst time of their life. And what's memorable to me, having done hundreds of these cases, is it's always that chance to bring something positive out of a terrible situation for a family.
I don't understand why they didn't just come break in, take the money, and leave. everything, down to pennies, everything. My father was a very good man. He would help anybody.
He's just an amazing person, and there's nobody like him. And I miss him and I want him back, but I can't say those things, so that's why I'm saying them here.
We gotta get back there and we gotta get some caution tape. We'll call that started off as a shots fired call is now turned into a homicide.
Darian was a good-hearted person.
With an armed and dangerous shooter on the loose, we needed to get him off the streets of Akron fast.
The call came in just after 2 in the morning, slicing through the quiet like a blade. In the Texas summer of 1982, that hour belonged to cicadas, distant engines, and the heavy stillness that settled over small towns after midnight. The dispatcher's voice was clipped, urgent, stripped of emotion by repetition and training. A body had been found along a service road, just outside town limits. No name, no witnesses, only a shape on the ground that refused to move. By the time the first patrol car arrived, the heat was already rising from the asphalt, turning the air thick and metallic. Headlights washed over gravel, weeds, and a pair of legs stretched unnaturally still. The officer stepped out slowly, hand resting on his belt, instinctively scanning the darkness beyond the beams. There was no movement. No sound except the ticking of the engine and his own breathing. One look was enough to know this wasn't an accident. This was the kind of discovery that rewrote nights, that followed people home and kept them awake long after sunrise. Texas in 1982 was wide and loud by day, but at night it could feel empty, almost abandoned. Highways cut through fields and oil land, carrying strangers who never learned the names of the towns they passed. The service road where the body lay was one of those forgotten strips of pavement, used by truckers to pull over and locals to avoid traffic. It wasn't a place anyone lingered. That made it perfect, and that realization settled in quickly among the officers on scene. She was young. That much was obvious. Her eyes were open, fixed on nothing, reflecting the harsh white of flashlights. One shoe was missing. The other lay twisted at an angle that suggested she hadn't left it behind willingly. There was dust on her clothes, ground into fabric as if she'd been dragged or had fought against the earth itself. No pers. No identification. Just a body cooling under the Texas sky, already becoming a mystery. As backup arrived, red and blue lights pulsed against the darkness, a silent alarm to anyone awake nearby. The road was shut down. Yellow tape went up, fluttering weakly in the hot wind. A small crowd gathered at a distance, drawn by curiosity and fear in equal measure. People whispered. Some recognized her face before the police said a word. Others prayed it wasn't someone they knew. In towns like this, those were often the same thing. Detectives reached the scene before dawn, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp despite the hour. They moved with practiced urgency, photographing, measuring, marking every detail before the sun could burn it away. A cigarette butt lay crushed near the edge of the gravel. Tire impressions cut through the dirt, overlapping, confused, half destroyed by passing vehicles. There were marks on her arms, bruises already darkening, telling a story without words. The medical examiner would later confirm what everyone suspected. This was a homicide. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, it revealed more than just the body. It revealed a town waking up to a nightmare. Radios crackled with early reports. Phones rang in kitchens and living rooms. By mid-morning, everyone knew. A woman had been killed, dumped by the road, and no one knew why. Her name was released later that day, and with it came the second shock. She wasn't a drifter. She wasn't passing through. She lived here. She had family just a few miles away. She had plans, routines, people who expected her home the night before. The idea that someone could vanish, be murdered, and left so close to familiar streets sent a wave of panic through the community. This wasn't something that happened in big cities on the evening news. This was here. The investigation moved fast at first, driven by pressure and outrage. Detectives knocked on doors until knuckles were raw. They retraced her last known movements, minute by minute, asking the same questions again and again. Who saw her last? Where was she going? Did she mention meeting someone? A gas station clerk remembered her stopping by late, buying a soda, asking about a shortcut. A neighbor heard a car idle too long near midnight. A trucker recalled seeing a woman standing by the road, waving him past. Each detail felt important. Each one slipped through their fingers when they tried to hold it still. Suspects emerged almost immediately, as they always do. An ex-boyfriend with a temper and a shaky alibi. A local man known for hanging around the highway late at night. A trucker passing through with a record in another state. They were questioned, scrutinized, compared against what little evidence existed. None of it stuck. Alibis hardened. Timelines refused to line up. The case grew heavier with every unanswered question. Forensics in 1982 offered limited comfort. Blood typing narrowed possibilities but named no one. Fibers were compared under microscopes, similarities noted, conclusions hedged. The cigarette butt was logged, bagged, and filed away. Its potential unrealized in an era before DNA databases. Every test ended the same way, with language that sounded official but meant nothing. Inconclusive. The funeral was held under a blazing sun, the kind that made grief feel heavier, harder to carry. The church overflowed. People stood outside, fanning themselves, listening through open doors as hymns drifted out into the heat. The casket passed slowly, and with it went a piece of the town's sense of safety. Parents hugged children tighter. Doors were locked earlier at night. Every unfamiliar car became a source of suspicion. As weeks turned into months, the investigation slowed. Detectives followed leads that led nowhere. Tips came in, some sincere, some wild, some clearly driven by fear rather than fact. Each one was logged, checked, crossed off. The file grew thick, then stagnant. New cases demanded attention. Resources shifted. The murder remained officially open, but everyone involved could feel the momentum fading. By the first anniversary, the phrase cold case began to surface in quiet conversations. Not in press releases, not in official statements, but in the way people spoke when they thought no one was listening. The patrol cars no longer lingered near the service road. The spot where she was found blended back into the landscape. Just another stretch of Texas pavement. Cars passed without slowing, drivers unaware or unwilling to remember what had happened there. Years moved on. Children grew up hearing fragments of the story, warnings disguised as bedtime tales. Don't stay out late. Don't trust strangers. Remember what happened in '82. The victim's family marked time by absence, by birthdays and holidays that felt permanently altered. They called the sheriff's office again and again, hoping for news that never came. The answers were always the same. No new leads. The investigation remains open. Decades later, the world changed in ways no one in that small Texas town could have imagined in 1982. Technology advanced. Old evidence found new purpose. Somewhere in an evidence room, items collected in the heat of that summer waited quietly, sealed and forgotten, holding information no one knew how to read back then. And then, almost 40 years after a body was found by the side of the road, a name surfaced again. Not whispered, not rumored, official. A suspect, charged. The headline spread fast, igniting shock and disbelief. For some, it felt like justice waking up after a long sleep. For others, it reopened wounds they had spent a lifetime trying to close. Because a cold case doesn't die. It lingers. It settles into the walls of a community, into memory and silence. And when it finally stirs, it brings every unanswered moment with it, demanding to be seen, to be heard, to be faced at last. The silence that followed the funeral did not mean peace, it meant absorption. The kind where a town swallows a tragedy whole and lets it sink into everyday life. Where people learn to step around an invisible wound without ever acknowledging it's still bleeding. In the weeks after her burial, the service road went back to being just a road, but no one who lived nearby ever drove past it the same way again. Some slowed without realizing. Some looked away. Some checked their rearview mirrors twice, then a third time because fear has a way of lingering long after the sirens stop. Inside the sheriff's office, the case refused to rest. Files were stacked, photographs pinned, timelines drawn and redrawn on yellow legal pads already stained with coffee rings and sweat. Detectives replayed the same night over and over, trying to force it into sense. Somewhere between the gas station stop and the stretch of dark pavement where her body was found, something had gone terribly wrong. The question was where. The question was who. And the question that haunted them most was how no one had seen it happen. They went back to the gas station first, the last confirmed place she'd been alive. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as detectives stood where she had stood, imagining her voice, her posture, her state of mind. The clerk remembered her clearly now, not because she seemed afraid, but because she didn't. She was calm, normal. She joked about the heat. She asked about the quickest way home. That detail stuck like a thorn. Whatever happened next, it didn't begin with panic. It began with trust, or at least with the absence of fear. From there, the timeline blurred. She should have been home within minutes. Instead, she vanished into a gap no one could explain. Detectives mapped every possible route, every turnoff, every place a car could pull over unnoticed. They drove those roads at night, headlights cutting through the same darkness, engines idling in the same quiet. They listened. They watched. Nothing revealed itself. The land gave nothing back. Witnesses were re-interviewed, their statements picked apart for cracks. The neighbor who heard an engine idling too long couldn't say what kind of car it was. The trucker who waved her past wasn't sure of the time. The farmer who heard something strange admitted it might have been coyotes. Memory shifted under pressure, reshaping itself to fit fear and hindsight. The harder detectives pushed, the less solid the recollections became. Rumors filled the gaps left by facts. Names circulated in whispers, passed from porch to porch, from barstool to barstool. A local man with a bad reputation. A drifter seen near the highway weeks earlier. A couple known for fighting loudly late at night. None of it could be proven. All of it added weight to a case already bending under expectation. In small towns, suspicion spreads faster than truth, and once a name is spoken aloud, it never fully escapes. The ex-boyfriend was questioned again, this time more aggressively. His alibi held, but only just. Friends vouched for him. Timelines matched closely enough to raise doubts but not enough to file charges. He left the station shaken, angry, followed by looks that lingered too long. He would move away within a year, carrying the stain with him, guilty or not. The case claimed collateral damage without ever claiming a culprit. As summer gave way to fall, pressure mounted from outside agencies offering limited assistance and quiet judgment. Why hadn't there been an arrest? Why hadn't there been progress? The sheriff's department pushed back, citing lack of evidence, lack of resources, lack of cooperation. Behind closed doors, frustration simmered. They had a victim. They had a crime scene. They had a town demanding answers. What they didn't have was the one thing that mattered most. Evidence was re-examined again and again. The cigarette butt was tested, logged, tested again, its usefulness exhausted by the science of the time. Fibers from her clothing were compared against samples taken from suspects' vehicles, homes, workplaces. Similarities emerged, then collapsed under scrutiny. Nothing was definitive. Everything was almost. The medical examiner's report offered no clarity beyond confirmation of violence. Cause of death established, manner ruled homicide. Time of death estimated within a frustratingly wide window. Enough to know she had suffered. Not enough to know when help might have made a difference. That uncertainty gnawed at investigators, at the family, at anyone who allowed themselves to think too deeply about her final hours. Media attention flared briefly, then faded. A few headlines. A grainy photo in the local paper. A promise of justice that grew quieter with each passing week. Bigger stories took over. Elections. Accidents. Sports. The murder slipped from the front page to the archives, from conversation to memory. Officially, the case remained open. Unofficially, it began to freeze. By the time winter arrived, detectives were chasing shadows. Tips slowed to a trickle, then dried up altogether. The service road yielded nothing new. The town settled into an uneasy normalcy, learning to live with the absence of answers. The phrase, "if they didn't catch him by now," began to surface, usually followed by silence. Years stacked quietly on top of one another. Evidence boxes were sealed, labeled, and moved from one storage room to another as buildings changed and budgets shifted. New deputies joined the force, learning about the case as a cautionary tale, a reminder that not every crime ends with handcuffs and closure. The older investigators carried it differently, a weight they didn't speak about but never fully set down. The victim's family aged with the case. Grief hardened into something steadier, heavier. They marked anniversaries not with hope, but with endurance. Each phone call from an unknown number sparked a flicker that died quickly. Each news report about advances in forensic science stirred questions they were afraid to ask out loud. What if the answer had been there all along? What if time itself was the only thing missing? Decades later, when the evidence was finally pulled from storage again, it felt almost ceremonial. Gloves snapped on. Boxes were opened. Items touched for the first time in years saw light again. Technology had changed. The rules were different now. What once seemed useless was now full of potential. A sample preserved more out of protocol than expectation was re-examined, processed, translated into data that could be compared, matched, identified. The result didn't come with drama at first. Just a notification. A hit. A name that didn't belong to any suspect from 1982. A man who had lived quietly, who had aged, who had built a life that seemed incompatible with the word murder. Investigators stared at the file, feeling the strange dissonance of time folding in on itself. The realization spread slowly, deliberately. This wasn't closure yet. This was a door opening after 40 years of being sealed shut. And as the town prepared to hear the name, to see the past dragged back into the present, one truth became unavoidable. Time does not erase violence. It only waits. When the name finally surfaced inside the sheriff's office, it did not arrive with sirens or celebration. It came quietly, printed on a sheet of paper, carried by a lab report that spoke in clinical language and probabilities. The room went still as detectives read it, each of them aware that this was the moment they had waited for and feared in equal measure. A match. Not perfect, not absolute in the way television promised, but strong enough to reopen a door that had been sealed for decades. The man identified by the result was not a ghost from the past. He was alive. He had an address, a job history, a face that could be found in public records, aging year by year, ordinary in a way that felt almost obscene. He had lived through the same decades the town had, watching the world change, building a routine that had never once intersected with a courtroom for this crime. The idea that he might have carried the truth of that night with him for 40 years sent a chill through everyone who touched the file. Detectives moved carefully, knowing how fragile old cases could be. One misstep, one overreach, and the entire thing could collapse under scrutiny. They went back to the beginning, not with fresh eyes, but with eyes sharpened by time. They reread every statement, every note scribbled in haste during the summer of 1982. They compared timelines, locations, movements. Slowly, patterns emerged where there had once been noise. The suspect's name appeared in the margins more than once, overlooked, dismissed, lost among dozens of others. He had been questioned briefly years ago, a routine interaction that never escalated. He lived near the highway then. He worked hours that put him on the road late at night. None of it had seemed remarkable at the time. In hindsight, it felt suffocatingly obvious, a constellation of details that only aligned after decades of darkness. Surveillance began quietly. There were no dramatic stakeouts, no flashing lights. Just cars parked at a distance, eyes watching a man go about his life. He bought groceries. He chatted with neighbors. He laughed. There was nothing about him that fit the image people carried of a killer, and that made it worse. It suggested a level of control, of compartmentalization, that was difficult to accept. Investigators sought corroboration, anything to strengthen what the lab had suggested. They tracked down old witnesses, now elderly, their memories fragile but persistent. Some couldn't remember details. Others remembered too much, stories shaped by years of retelling. A few recalled the suspect vaguely, a man seen near the service road, a face that sparked discomfort without clarity. It wasn't enough on its own. It never was. The victim's family was notified with caution, brought into a room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. They listened as detectives explained the development, careful to manage expectations. A suspect identified. An investigation reopened. No promises. Just movement finally after a lifetime of stillness. The family absorbed the words differently. each of them carrying their own version of hope and dread. Hope that the truth might finally surface. Dread of what that truth might look like. As the news leaked, the town reacted with a mixture of disbelief and hunger. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when the suspect's name was mentioned. People searched their memories trying to place him, trying to reconcile the man they knew with the act he was accused of. Some defended him immediately. Others recoiled. Old divisions resurfaced, lines drawn along memory and rumor. The past refused to stay buried. Detectives requested additional testing, squeezing every possible answer from the evidence. The technology that had once failed them now delivered details with unnerving precision. Partial profiles became stronger. Probabilities narrowed. The case began to solidify, not into certainty, but into something sturdy enough to stand in court. Each confirmation felt like another weight added to a scale that had been unbalanced for decades. The suspect was brought in for questioning under the pretense of routine follow-up. He walked into the interview room without resistance, unaware of how much the world around him had shifted. The room was small, windowless, designed to strip away comfort and control. He sat down, hands folded, eyes alert. When detectives mentioned the night in 1982, something flickered across his face. It was subtle, a tightening. Pause too long to ignore. The questions came slowly at first, circling, probing. Where were you that night? Do you remember her? Had you ever been on that service road after midnight? His answers were measured, careful, rehearsed in the way only long-held memories can be. He denied knowing her, denied being there, denied everything that mattered. But denial alone was no longer enough. When detectives introduced the forensic findings, the atmosphere shifted. The suspect leaned back, exhaled, smiled faintly. He questioned the science. He questioned the timeline. He questioned the competence of a system that had waited 40 years to accuse him of anything. His confidence was unsettling, built on the knowledge that time erodes more than memories. It erodes cases. Charges were filed weeks later, after consultations, reviews, and a silence that stretched thin. The announcement was brief, factual, devoid of drama. A suspect charged in a 1982 homicide. The words echoed louder than any siren ever could. Reporters descended on the town, cameras trained on streets that had not seen this level of attention in generations. Headlines screamed what people had whispered for years. Cold case reopened. Arrest made. Justice delayed. The arrest itself was almost mundane. The suspect was taken into custody without resistance, hands placed behind his back, face unreadable. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, stunned. Some cried. Some shook their heads. The image of him being led away burned itself into the town's collective memory, a mirror held up to the past and the present at once. But the case was far from over. Defense attorneys moved quickly, dismantling the narrative piece by piece. They questioned the reliability of decades-old evidence. They attacked the gaps in the timeline. They argued contamination, coincidence, reasonable doubt. Each argument reopened wounds, forcing the community to confront the uncomfortable truth that reopening a case did not guarantee resolution. For the victim's family, the legal process became a new kind of torment. They sat through hearings, listening to their loved one reduced to exhibits and arguments. They heard the night dissected in ways that felt invasive, clinical, detached from the pain it had caused. Closure, they learned, was not a moment. It was a marathon, and they were already exhausted. As the trial loomed, the town held its breath. 40 years of silence had given way to noise, to speculation, to fear of disappointment. People wondered what it would mean if the case fell apart again, if the truth slipped through their fingers a second time. They wondered if some mysteries were too old to solve, too entrenched in time to ever fully emerge. And beneath it all, one question persisted, louder than the rest. If this man had lived among them for decades, if the truth had been this close all along, what else remained hidden, waiting patiently, confident that time would protect it? The days after the arrest did not bring relief. They brought a different kind of tension, the kind that sits low in the chest and tightens whenever a siren passes or a headline scrolls across a screen. The town was no longer just remembering the past, it was living inside it again. Every conversation seemed to circle back to the same questions, spoken softly or argued loudly, depending on who was listening. Was it really him? Why now? How could something so old still feel this raw? Inside the courthouse, the case took on a new shape. What had once been a collection of yellowed reports and fading photographs was now a living thing, examined under harsh lights, dissected by opposing narratives. Prosecutors spoke of patience, of science catching up with silence, of evidence that had waited decades for its moment. Defense attorneys spoke of time as a weapon, of memories corrupted, of proof stretched thin by years of neglect. Each side claimed reason. Each side claimed truth. The evidence that once felt like a breakthrough now faced relentless scrutiny. The forensic results were explained again and again, translated into language meant to persuade 12 strangers who had not lived through 1982. Probabilities were emphasized. Margins of error debated. Experts testified with calm authority, aware that every word could tip the balance. The defense countered with their own specialists, voices equally confident, casting doubt with surgical precision. Science, it seemed, could accuse and absolve in the same breath. Old witnesses were called, some walking slowly to the stand, leaning on canes, guided by family members. Their voices trembled not just with age, but with the weight of being asked to remember something they had tried to forget. Dates blurred. Details shifted. The prosecution urged the jury to see consistency beneath the uncertainty. The defense highlighted every hesitation, every contradiction, turning the passage of time into an ally. Photographs from the crime scene were displayed, grainy and stark, pulling the room back to that Texas road in 1982. Some jurors looked away. Others stared, absorbing the reality that had once been contained by police tape and rumor. The victim's family sat silently, hands clasped, eyes fixed forward. For them, this was not history. It was ongoing. Outside the courtroom, the town fractured in quiet ways. Some residents rallied behind the prosecution, convinced that justice, though late, was finally within reach. Others grew defensive, clinging to the image of the suspect as they had known him, a neighbor, a co-worker, a man who waved and smiled and seemed incapable of such violence. Yard conversations ended abruptly. Long-standing friendships cooled. The case drew lines no one had expected. The media fed the tension, replaying the story in looping segments, compressing 40 years into sound bites and graphics. Old footage surfaced. Black and white photographs of the victim as a young woman appeared alongside recent images of the accused, gray-haired and stiff. The contrast unsettled viewers, forcing them to confront how much time had passed, how much had been lost. As testimony continued, the narrative grew more complex. The prosecution reconstructed the night in fragments, placing the suspect near the service road, tying his movements to gaps in the timeline, suggesting opportunity and intent. The defense dismantled the reconstruction piece by piece, pointing out alternative explanations, missing links, unanswered questions. The jury was asked to navigate a maze built from memory, science, and doubt. Behind the scenes, the pressure on investigators was immense. A second failure would not just mean a lost case. It would mean reopening wounds without healing them, confirming fears that the truth had slipped away forever. Detectives reviewed their work obsessively, replaying interviews, rechecking reports, aware that any overlooked detail could unravel everything. The suspect remained outwardly composed throughout the proceedings. He listened, took notes, whispered occasionally to his attorneys. Observers searched his face for signs of guilt or remorse, but found only restraint. It was impossible to tell whether that restraint came from innocence, experience, or something darker. The ambiguity unsettled everyone. For the victim's family, each day in court was an endurance test. They heard their loved ones' final moments theorized, debated, reduced to arguments about probability. They watched as her life was summarized in minutes, her death examined in hours. Closure, once imagined as a single moment of justice, now felt distant and conditional. As the trial moved toward its climax, the weight of expectation pressed harder. The jury would soon retreat to deliberate, carrying with them decades of silence and weeks of testimony. The town waited, suspended between hope and dread, aware that whatever the verdict, it would not restore what had been taken. Because the truth about cold cases is this: solving them does not erase the years spent unsolved. It does not give back youth or peace or the sense of safety lost on a summer night long ago. It only offers an answer, fragile and contested, to a question that has haunted everyone involved. And as the courtroom lights dimmed for the evening and the jurors filed out, one thought lingered, heavy and unresolved. Even if the law reached a conclusion, the past would not release its grip so easily. It never does. The jury room closed with a dull thud, sealing 12 strangers inside a space thick with expectation and fatigue. Outside, the courthouse exhaled, its hallways suddenly quieter, as if the building itself understood that whatever happened next would echo far beyond its walls. Phones buzzed. Cameras waited. The town held its breath, caught between the need for an ending and the fear of another unanswered question. Inside that room, the past was laid out on a long table in the form of binders, notes, and memories borrowed from other people's lives. The jurors spoke cautiously at first, voices low, testing the air. They returned to the beginning, as everyone always does, to that summer night in 1982, to the service road, to the woman who never made it home. They talked about timelines, about gaps, about what felt solid and what felt slippery. Each juror carried a private scale, weighing belief against doubt. The forensic evidence became the center of gravity. Some saw it as the bridge across 4 decades, the one thing that did not age, that did not forget. Others saw it as fragile, vulnerable to contamination, interpretation, coincidence. They debated probabilities late into the afternoon, grappling with numbers that promised clarity but delivered ambiguity. Science, they learned, was not a verdict. It was a voice in the room, persuasive but not decisive on its own. Memories of witness testimony resurfaced, uneven and emotional. An elderly man's shaking hand as he pointed to a photograph. A woman's voice cracking as she tried to recall the sound of an engine in the dark. The jurors argued about reliability, about whether truth could survive 40 years intact. Some believed the essence remained even if details faded. Others worried that memory, like evidence, could be reshaped by time and repetition. As daylight slipped away, the conversation grew heavier. They spoke about the defendant not as an abstraction, but as a man who had lived, worked, aged. A man who sat quietly in the courtroom, whose life would be irrevocably altered by whatever decision they reached. The weight of that responsibility pressed down, complicating the narrative. Justice demanded certainty. The case offered none. Outside, the town filled the waiting hours with speculation. Cafes buzzed with whispered theories. Radios replayed analysis from legal experts who had never set foot on the service road. Families gathered around televisions, reliving a story that had woven itself into their lives long before the trial. The victim's family waited in silence, the familiar ache returning with new intensity. They had learned not to hope too loudly. Night fell and still the jury deliberated. They sent notes to the judge, requesting transcripts, clarifications, definitions. Each request signaled struggle, not progress. The courthouse lights burned late, a beacon of unresolved tension in a town that had already given too much patience to this case. When the jury finally emerged the next day, faces drawn and unreadable, the room snapped to attention. The verdict was delivered calmly, without flourish, words spoken that carried decades of anticipation. Guilty on some counts, not guilty on others. A split decision that satisfied no one completely and angered many. The law had spoken, but it had not silenced the questions. Reactions rippled outward immediately. Some embraced, tears spilling as if a dam had finally cracked. Others stared in disbelief, convinced that the truth had been diluted by compromise. The defendant remained composed, absorbing the outcome with a stillness that defied easy interpretation. His family reacted in fragments of shock and relief, anger and sorrow, emotions colliding without resolution. Sentencing was scheduled for a later date, prolonging the ordeal. The case, it seemed, refused to conclude cleanly. In interviews, prosecutors framed the verdict as a victory for perseverance, proof that time did not have the final say. Defense attorneys called it a warning, a demonstration of how uncertainty could be mistaken for guilt. Both narratives found an audience. In the days that followed, the town struggled to recalibrate. The trial had reopened old divisions and created new ones. Conversations stalled when the case came up, as if people feared saying the wrong thing. Some avoided the service road entirely. Others drove it deliberately, staring out the window, trying to imagine what had happened there, trying to feel something definitive. For the victim's family, the verdict was both an ending and a beginning. It confirmed aspects of what they had believed for years, while leaving other parts painfully unresolved. They spoke publicly of gratitude and exhaustion, of relief tempered by grief. Justice, they learned, was not the same as peace. The defendant awaited sentencing in a quiet cell, his future now shaped by a crime from another lifetime. Whether guilty or not in the eyes of every observer, he had become inseparable from the case, his name forever linked to that summer night. Time had not protected him. It had only delayed the reckoning. As weeks passed, attention drifted as it always does. New stories replaced old headlines. But beneath the surface, the case continued to reverberate. Law enforcement agencies revisited their cold files, emboldened and unsettled by the outcome. Families of other victims wondered if their own cases might one day resurface, carrying hope and risk in equal measure. The service road remained unchanged, asphalt stretched under the same Texas sky, indifferent to verdicts and arguments. Cars passed. Weeds grew. The place where a life ended held its silence, offering no confirmation, no denial. It was a reminder that locations remember differently than people do, that they absorb violence and carry on. In the end, the case left behind something more complex than closure. It left a community forced to confront the limits of certainty, the cost of waiting, the uneasy truth that some answers arrive incomplete. The past had been dragged into the present, examined, judged, and yet it refused to settle. Because a cold case, even when reopened, even when tried, does not truly thaw. It changes form. It lingers in verdicts that divide, in memories that resist alignment, in roads that look ordinary but are anything but. And long after the courthouse empties and the cameras leave, the question remains, quiet and persistent, echoing through the years. Was this the truth, or just the closest the truth could come after 40 years of silence? Sentencing arrived without ceremony, folded into the calendar like an obligation everyone had been trying to postpone. The courtroom filled again, not with anticipation this time, but with a weary gravity. Faces that had grown familiar over weeks of testimony took their places as if returning to a long, unfinished conversation. The judge listened, impassive, as arguments were restated, as if repetition might somehow change their weight. The prosecution spoke of accountability, of a life cut short and a truth delayed but not denied. They framed the sentence as the final step in a journey that had begun on a dark road in 1982. The defense countered with appeals to uncertainty, to mercy shaped by time, to the idea that punishment so late could never align with justice. Each side spoke carefully, knowing the words would be replayed, quoted, argued over long after the gavel fell. When the sentence was pronounced, it landed softly, almost anticlimactically, a legal conclusion to a story that refused to feel concluded. There was no outburst, no dramatic collapse. The defendant absorbed it with the same controlled stillness he had shown throughout the trial. His family reacted in fragments, some relief, some despair, emotions splintered by years of denial and sudden confrontation. The victim's family listened in silence, their expressions unreadable, carrying a verdict that answered some questions while amplifying others. Outside, microphones waited. Statements were delivered with practiced restraint. Justice served. System worked. Words that sounded solid until they were examined too closely. The town listened, nodded, argued, moved on all at once. But beneath the surface, the case continued to ripple, disturbing layers that had settled over decades. In the weeks that followed, attention shifted from the courtroom to the broader implications. Law enforcement agencies across the state revisited their own unsolved files, inspired and unsettled by what had happened here. Evidence rooms were reopened. Boxes were unsealed. The idea that time itself could be challenged gained traction, but so did fear. Fear of reopening wounds. Fear of raising expectations that might collapse under scrutiny. For the detectives who had worked the reopened case, there was no sense of victory. Only exhaustion and a lingering unease. They replayed every decision, every assumption, aware that this case would be studied, criticized, cited. Some nights they found themselves thinking less about the conviction and more about the years before it, the missed connections, the moments when the answer might have been within reach but invisible. The victim's family retreated from public view, seeking privacy after decades of enforced exposure. Friends and neighbors offered support, unsure of what to say. Congratulations felt inappropriate. Condolences felt outdated. They navigated a strange emotional landscape where justice and grief coexisted without blending. The past had finally been acknowledged, but it had not loosened its grip. The defendant was transferred to a facility far from the town, his presence reduced to a line in official records. Some residents felt safer knowing he was gone. Others felt hollow, unsettled by the realization that his absence did not erase the years he had been among them. The idea that a violent act could coexist with normal life for so long challenged comforting assumptions about monsters and warning signs. As months passed, the media moved on, but the story lingered in quieter spaces. Late-night conversations, empty roads. The service road became a symbol again, not just of a crime, but of the limits of resolution. People drove past it and wondered what justice looked like when it arrived 4 decades late. Was it enough? Was it fair? Did it matter? Academic discussions followed, panels dissecting the case as an example of modern forensics meeting historical failure. Experts debated reliability, ethics, the balance between progress and prudence. The case entered textbooks and conferences, transformed into a lesson stripped of its human edges. For those who had lived it, that transformation felt both validating and alienating. The town itself continued to change as towns do. New families moved in, unaware of the story etched into the pavement. Older residents carried it quietly, unsure when or how to pass it on. The murder became a reference point rather than an open wound, but it never fully faded. It resurfaced in unexpected ways, in jokes cut short, in sudden silences when certain years were mentioned. For other families with unsolved cases, the outcome ignited cautious hope. Calls to police departments increased. Letters arrived. Evidence was requested. Each inquiry carried the same question beneath the surface. Could this happen for us? Could time finally give something back? Law enforcement responded carefully, aware of the responsibility that hope carried. And yet, not all reactions were hopeful. Some questioned whether the case should have remained frozen, whether reopening it had created more harm than healing. They pointed to the uncertainties, the divided verdict, the lingering doubts. They asked whether justice delayed could ever truly be justice, or whether it was simply a narrative imposed on loss. The service road remained unchanged, a quiet witness to debates it could not answer. Sun and rain wore it down. Repairs came and went. There was no marker, no plaque, nothing to indicate what had happened there. Those who knew knew. Those who didn't passed through without pause. The land held its memory without explanation. In private moments, the detectives and family members found themselves asking questions they rarely voiced. What if the case had been solved sooner? What if technology had arrived earlier? What if someone had spoken up? These questions had no destination. They circled endlessly, feeding regret without offering resolution. As the first anniversary of the sentencing approached, the town marked it quietly. There were no ceremonies, no official statements, just an awareness that a year had passed since the past had been dragged back into the present. Life had continued as it always does, but not unchanged. The case had become something else now, no longer just an unsolved murder or a reopened file. It was a reminder, heavy and persistent, that time is not a cure. It is a container. It holds pain, memory, and truth until something forces it open. And as the Texas sky darkened each evening, stretching over roads that remembered more than they revealed, the question lingered, unresolved and insistent. Not whether the case had been solved, but whether the solving had been enough to quiet the echo that began on that summer night in 1982. Even after the verdict, the air in the town remained charged, taut like a wire strung too tightly. People moved cautiously, scanning faces, scanning streets, scanning the service road that had become a silent character in a story everyone knew but no one fully understood. The highway was the same highway, asphalt stretching under the Texas sun, weeds lining the edges, the wind carrying the faint scent of oil and dust, but everything else had shifted. The past had seeped into the present, and no one could pretend otherwise. The victim's family continued to navigate the strange aftermath. They were living in a liminal space, suspended between grief and a delayed sense of justice. Mornings began with coffee and quiet reflection. Evenings ended with the same questions, those they had learned to ask in whispers, or to never voice at all. Was the man in custody the one responsible? Did the conviction finally honor her life? Could 40 years of absence ever be reconciled with the sudden intrusion of truth? Every answer felt partial, incomplete, fleeting. Detectives who had worked the cold case reflected on decades of effort, some of it futile, some of it painstaking, all of it forming the bedrock for the eventual breakthrough. They had watched evidence sit in boxes for years, unexamined, forgotten. They had tracked the faintest leads, followed hunches, revisited witness statements, knowing instinctively that patience might be the only ally. Now, in the quiet that followed the trial, they wondered how much had been lost, how many moments could never be recovered. The town itself had changed, yet some elements remained stubbornly familiar. The same corner stores, the same small houses, the same neighbors nodding politely, smiling but carrying the burden of shared memory. Conversations touched lightly on the past, careful to avoid raw edges. Even when the case was discussed, it was discussed as a historical event, a story from another era with consequences that were still unfolding, but slightly removed from daily life. Local media revisited the story periodically, anniversaries of the arrest and trial providing hooks for retrospectives. They broadcast images of the service road still empty, still indifferent. They aired old photographs of the victim, her youth and innocence juxtaposed against the man in custody. Experts were invited to comment, discussing forensic advances, investigative techniques, and the ethics of revisiting decades-old cases. The public consumed it voraciously, hungry for a narrative that was messy and long, unlike the tidy stories of instant resolution often seen elsewhere. Despite media attention, some residents felt the story belonged to them alone. They had walked the streets of the town when fear was a constant companion. They had driven past the service road at night, hearts tight, windows rolled up, imagining dangers that might never have existed. Their memories were colored by years of absence, of unspoken anxiety, and now the resurfacing of the case stirred emotions that felt almost too heavy to bear. Some avoided conversation entirely. Others spoke freely, seeking to exorcise decades of suppressed fear. The balance between caution and expression was fragile. The suspect's presence in the legal system continued to ripple outward. Appeals were filed. Motions requested. The defense argued procedural points, highlighting the decades that had elapsed, the changes in standards, and the reliability of evidence collected long ago. Prosecutors pushed back with equal diligence, emphasizing that justice delayed was not justice denied, that the truth had waited patiently for its day, and that accountability remained the ultimate goal. Each filing, each counter, each ruling extended the story further, dragging the community along with it. Meanwhile, the human cost remained starkly visible. The victim's family carried scars that could not be erased, scars beyond the reach of verdicts or sentences. Their daily routines, relationships, and mental landscapes were all reshaped by events that had started 40 years earlier. Simple tasks became opportunities for reflection, for remembrance, for imagining what might have been. The anniversary of her disappearance was observed quietly, with small gestures that acknowledged absence more than presence. Candles flickered in windows, flowers were left on familiar spots, and moments of silence stretched long into the evening. Psychological burdens weighed heavily on those involved in the investigation. Detectives reflected not just on what had happened, but on what they might have missed, what doors they could have opened sooner, what lives could have been different. Guilt, though unspoken publicly, lingered among them, a subtle acknowledgement that law enforcement, like the town itself, had been both a participant in and a witness to prolonged uncertainty. The question of what if was a persistent companion, appearing in the quiet hours when memories replayed in slow motion. The service road remained a mute observer of these years. No plaque commemorated the night. No signs marked its infamy. Yet for those who knew, the asphalt, the weeds, and the bends in the road were etched into collective consciousness. It had become a symbol of the thin line between ordinary life and sudden tragedy, a place where routine could be shattered in an instant, and where memory carried the weight of unresolved questions. Each passing car was a reminder of the everyday world moving past a space still heavy with past violence. Over time, discussions in the town expanded to the broader implications of cold cases. Law enforcement, schools, local historians, and community leaders debated the nature of memory, accountability, and justice. Panels were formed. Public meetings were held. The conversations were not always comfortable, but they were necessary. They revealed the fragility of trust, the complexity of human behavior, and the persistence of questions that even decades cannot fully answer. Legal scholars reference the Texas case in studies of criminal justice and forensic science, analyzing the interplay between technology, human memory, and the law. It became a cautionary tale, a demonstration of the balance between patience and precision, and a warning that time both aids and obscures truth. Conferences discussed the ethics of delayed prosecutions, the reliability of witnesses, and the challenges of maintaining evidence integrity over decades. Each reference, each citation, served as a reminder that while the case may have reached a verdict, its impact continued to extend outward, shaping professional and public perspectives alike. Amidst the analysis, the human element remained unyielding. Those who had been close to the victim, those who had worked the case, and those who lived in the town all carried private narratives. Memories were recalled differently, emotions were experienced differently, and perspectives were shaped by years of waiting. Even those who had left the town maintained a connection, a quiet sense of responsibility or remorse, a recognition that the past never truly fades, even when removed geographically. The service road under Texas skies remained both ordinary and extraordinary. Sunlight fell across its surface, and wind carried the same scent of oil and dust, unchanged by time, indifferent to verdicts and trials. For residents, the road was a reminder that life moves forward, yet remains tethered to events that define it. It was a boundary between memory and oblivion, a place that had absorbed trauma silently and continued to bear witness without acknowledgement. In private reflections, investigators and family members often return to one thought: that time, while a healer in some ways, is a relentless observer in others. It watches, waits, and finally exposes what it has witnessed. 40 years had passed, yet the case had emerged again, demanding attention, accountability, and reflection. It forced the community to confront uncomfortable truths and to acknowledge that justice, though delayed, leaves a residue far beyond the courtroom walls. And as the town continued to live under Texas skies, the echoes of 1982 remained. Conversations paused, glances lingered, and every new day carried with it the weight of an unsolved night, now partially resolved but still heavy with unanswered questions. The cold case, once silent for decades, had spoken. Its voice was uneven, delayed, and incomplete, but it was undeniable. It reminded everyone that history is never truly past, that memory persists, and that the line between ordinary life and tragedy can be crossed in the blink of an eye, leaving echoes that resonate far into the future. The courtroom lights dimmed as the final witnesses were dismissed, leaving a silence that felt heavier than the noise of testimony. The trial, which had stretched for weeks, had become a strange mix of resolution and suspense. Everyone had expected clarity, closure, perhaps relief, but what remained was tension, thick and unyielding, clinging to the walls, the seats, and the people who had lived through it all. Time had changed the participants, but it could not alter the raw weight of what had happened on that summer night in 1982. Outside, the town adjusted to a new rhythm, one shaped by both history and the present. Shops opened and closed as usual, children played in yards, neighbors exchanged greetings, but beneath the surface awareness lingered. Every passing car, every late-night footstep, every unfamiliar face carried potential significance. The service road that had been silent for decades had become a psychological landmark. Residents drove past it, some faster, some slower, some refusing to drive there at all, the memory of that night overlaying the asphalt and weeds like a shadow that never fully lifted. The victim's family moved through these days like ghosts, balancing between exhaustion and vigilance. Each morning brought reminders of what had been lost. Each evening carried reflections of the trial and its aftermath. Conversations with friends and relatives were cautious, measured. Questions remained. Had justice truly been served? Could 40 years of absence ever be reconciled with a verdict handed down in the present? Even as sentences were carried out and appeals processed, the emotional resonance of that night lingered, impossible to quantify or contain. Detectives who had reopened the case spent hours reflecting on every step they had taken. They reviewed evidence, notes, and photographs, thinking about opportunities missed, leads ignored, and assumptions made. Every moment from the past was scrutinized through the lens of hindsight, each decision weighed against the benefit of decades of technological advancement. The crime, the investigation, and the resolution had become a living document of their careers, proof of persistence and frustration entwined. The defense continued to work diligently, filing appeals and motions that would prolong legal proceedings. They emphasized the difficulty of relying on witnesses whose memories had dimmed over decades, the potential degradation of physical evidence, and the challenges of drawing conclusions from data collected in an era before modern forensics. Every document, every filing, was a reminder that even as the past yielded new information, certainty remained elusive. Meanwhile, the town's collective psyche absorbed these developments unevenly. Conversations at the grocery store or the local diner drifted toward cautious speculation. Older residents recalled details with precision, recalling the sounds of engines, the flicker of headlights, and the feeling of unease that had settled over them that night. Younger residents pieced together the story from second-hand accounts, images, and newspaper articles, filling gaps with imagination and apprehension. The past had infiltrated the present, shaping behavior, perception, and expectation. Local media continued to cover developments in measured cycles, reporting on sentencing, appeals, and procedural updates. They revisited the service road with cameras and microphones, capturing the stillness, the weeds, the heat rising off asphalt, offering viewers a visual anchor to a story stretched across decades. Headlines were recycled with new emphasis, reminding readers that while time had moved forward, the consequences of a single night remained unresolved in the hearts and minds of those affected. For the victim's family, anniversaries became moments of reflection rather than commemoration. They lit candles quietly, leaving flowers in familiar places, observing the rituals of remembrance without spectacle. Each gesture served as a private acknowledgement that the past could not be erased, and that the echoes of loss would always be present, shaped by memory, grief, and the knowledge that justice, though pursued, could never restore what was lost. Law enforcement agencies across the region watched the case closely, recognizing both its successes and its lingering challenges. The use of modern forensic technology in conjunction with historical evidence became a case study, demonstrating both the potential and limits of criminal investigations extended across decades. Procedural reviews and internal evaluations were conducted, and officers were trained to consider the persistence of cold cases not as anomalies, but as ongoing responsibilities requiring diligence, patience, and integrity. The town itself continued to evolve, new families moving in, old families aging in place, landscape shifting with development and decay. The service road remained unchanged in form, but it had transformed in meaning, a landmark of memory and fear, caution and reflection. Its asphalt bore silent witness, absorbing decades of human observation, while weeds and dust settled over evidence long gone but not forgotten. Psychologically, the case reshaped understanding of justice, timing, and consequence. It demonstrated the impact of delayed resolution, not only on the victim and her family, but on the broader community. Residents became more aware of the fragile boundary between normal life and violence, of the subtle signs that might indicate danger, and of the enduring significance of memory, both individual and collective. Within law enforcement, detectives reflected on the moral dimensions of the case. The choice to reopen a decades-old investigation had profound consequences, bringing relief to some, suspicion to others, and controversy to all. It highlighted the tension between scientific capability and human limitation, between the passage of time and the persistence of accountability. Each officer involved carried private knowledge of both failure and success, of the unresolved grief that accompanies homicide investigations, and of the ethical responsibility to pursue truth, even when decades have passed. In the quiet of the town, late at night, the service road remained a silent witness. Its edges blurred by weeds, its surface scarred by traffic. It had seen nothing and yet knew everything. Residents who passed it felt a subtle unease, a tension carried forward from memories, warnings, and stories passed down. Even for those not alive in 1982, it represented a threshold, a liminal space where ordinary life and extraordinary tragedy intersected. The unresolved questions continued to hover. How had someone lived alongside a community for decades without detection? What could be learned from the past to prevent similar tragedies in the future? Was the justice now administered enough to quiet the lingering echoes of fear and grief? These questions were not easily answered, and the town adapted to their persistent presence, integrating them into daily awareness without fully resolving them. In the end, the cold case demonstrated the persistence of truth, even when delayed, but also the fragility of perception, memory, and emotional closure. It reminded all who encountered it that time could be both an ally and an obstacle, that justice could be pursued but never fully guarantee peace, and that some events leave traces that endure far beyond their immediate moment, shaping communities, lives, and legacies in ways that are both visible and invisible. And so, as Texas nights stretched across highways and backroads, the echoes of 1982 whispered in the wind, unseen but felt. The service road remained, indifferent yet unforgettable. The people remembered, reflected, and carried the weight of decades, a reminder that even when cases are solved, the past does not simply disappear. It lingers, persistent, haunting, and unresolved, leaving everyone who encounters it changed in ways both subtle and profound. Even after the legal proceedings had concluded, the town felt unsettled, as if the years of silence had left an invisible residue, one that no verdict could fully cleanse. Streets once familiar seemed altered under the weight of memory. The service road, the very axis of the tragedy, carried a presence all its own, quiet, enduring, indifferent to time and verdicts alike. Residents avoided it, drove past it cautiously, or lingered too long, imagining the moment that had changed everything. It had become a line between what was seen and unseen, known and unknown, ordinary and horrific. The victim's family, now navigating life after the trial, grappled with complex emotions. Relief mingled with continued grief, and even satisfaction at the conviction could not erase 40 years of uncertainty. Simple routines, the hum of morning coffee, the quiet of evening meals, were layered with remembrance. Memories of laughter, voice, and presence returned unbidden, sharp and raw. Their days were measured not just by time but by the echo of loss, by the sense of absence that no court could fully reconcile. Investigators who had reopened the case reflected on their own experiences with something akin to awe and disquiet. They had chased shadows, relied on intuition, technology, and painstaking review of decades-old records. Each breakthrough had felt miraculous, yet each success was tempered by the recognition of what had been lost along the way. Years of evidence degradation, witnesses who had passed away, memories reshaped by time. Their persistence had yielded answers, but the cost remained visible in the faces of the family, in the town's collective memory, and in their own sleepless nights. The suspect, now serving his sentence, became a quiet figure in the broader narrative. His presence was removed physically but remained symbolically. Friends, neighbors, and community members continued to wrestle with the dissonance of a man who had lived ordinary life for decades, yet now carried the extraordinary weight of a decades-old crime. His case prompted discussions about the nature of accountability, the complexity of human behavior, and the ability of society to detect evil hidden within the mundane. The town, once settled in uneasy normalcy, had been thrust back into a state of heightened awareness. Conversations at local stores, gas stations, and diners frequently returned to the case. Some residents expressed relief that justice had finally been pursued. Others expressed doubt or resentment, questioning the reliability of decades-old evidence or the ethics of reopening a case so long dormant. The dialogue was fragmented, fraught with emotion, and impossible to contain, illustrating how a single night could ripple across decades in a community's psyche. Law enforcement agencies continued to use the case as a reference point, evaluating procedures, archival methods, and investigative strategies. It became a blueprint for balancing patience with innovation, demonstrating both the potential of modern forensic technology and the enduring challenges posed by cold cases. Training programs incorporated its lessons, emphasizing meticulous record-keeping, the preservation of evidence, and the nuanced understanding of witness memory over long intervals. The case transcended the local, becoming a touchstone for professionals across the region. Psychologically, the impact extended far beyond the courtroom. Witnesses, neighbors, and even those peripherally involved found themselves revisiting memories and emotions previously buried. Conversations were tinged with careful observation and reflection. People measured what they said and how they reacted, aware that every word could carry weight in a narrative still unfolding in private and public spheres. The trial had reopened not just legal proceedings, but the emotional architecture of the town itself. The service road, unchanged in form yet transformed in meaning, continued to occupy a unique space in the collective imagination. Sunlight glinted off asphalt that had been witness to horror. Wind swept through surrounding weeds that obscured footprints and evidence alike. For residents, it was both a literal and figurative threshold. An ordinary roadway overlaid with extraordinary memory. Each journey along it, whether in haste or reflection, was a confrontation with both absence and presence, a confrontation with what had happened and what would never fully be known. The academic and professional communities dissected the case, analyzing it for its implications in forensic science, criminal justice, and psychology. Conferences discussed the ethics of delayed prosecution and the reliability of long-term evidence. Studies explored memory degradation, the influence of rumor on perception, and the persistence of trauma across decades. These examinations transformed the local tragedy into a broader narrative, demonstrating that the ramifications of a cold case extended far beyond the immediate circle of those involved. Despite the legal closure, the town was not at peace. Emotional closure remained elusive. Residents struggled with the fact that while a verdict had been reached, it could not undo the suffering, the fear, or the uncertainty that had defined decades of their lives. The balance between accountability and understanding remained tenuous. Life went on, but with layers of vigilance, introspection, and caution that had never existed before. Families of other victims watched the outcome closely, hoping for the same pursuit of truth in their cases, yet also wary of the potential for disappointment. They reached out to law enforcement, provided evidence, and urged the reopening of other cold cases, inspired by the proof that time, while formidable, could be challenged. The ripple effects of this single case began to spread, influencing procedures, advocacy, and public perception far beyond the boundaries of the town itself. In quiet moments, detectives revisited the evidence, the notes, the photographs, and the memories that had guided them. They contemplated the intersection of fate, timing, and human decision-making. Each insight was tempered by uncertainty. Each resolution highlighted what had been lost. They understood that while answers had been obtained, the narrative remained partial, a mosaic of fact, probability, and interpretation that could never be fully complete. Even as new generations moved into the town, unaware of the original events, the service road and the memory of the victim held sway. Oral histories, whispers, and subtle references ensured that the story was preserved, even as direct experience faded. In this way, the past and present coexisted, layered and interwoven, illustrating how a single act could resonate through time, shaping perception, behavior, and understanding across decades. The case's legacy, therefore, was both tangible and intangible. Tangible in its influence on law enforcement, forensic practice, and legal precedent. Intangible in the psychological, emotional, and social fabric of the community. It reminded all involved that the consequences of violence extend far beyond the immediate moment, that the pursuit of justice is never linear, and that time, while a great revealer, also tests patience, endurance, and the human capacity to reconcile with the unknown. And as the Texas night stretched over highways and fields, as wind whispered through weeds and asphalt, the echoes of 1982 remained. A cold case had been solved, but its lessons, its questions, and its shadows persisted. The service road was silent, the town moved forward, yet the memory endured. A quiet testament to the persistence of truth, the weight of absence, and the enduring human desire for closure, however elusive it might remain. Time had a strange way of bending in the town after the trial. Days blended into weeks, weeks into months, yet the shadow of 1982 hung over everything. The service road, once merely a stretch of asphalt connecting highways, had transformed into a silent monument to memory, grief, and the unsettling persistence of unanswered questions. People who had once driven past it without thought now slowed, peered through windshield reflections, or avoided it entirely, as if acknowledging it too casually might disturb its uneasy stillness. The road itself seemed to hold its breath, aware that its history would never be forgotten, and that its silence carried more weight than any verdict could confer. The victim's family moved through a landscape layered with emotional complexity. Relief at the conviction mingled with enduring sorrow, and even the sense of justice achieved could not erase 40 years of uncertainty. Daily routines became rituals of remembrance, subtle acts that spoke louder than words. A photograph placed with care, a candle lit quietly at dusk, the soft repetition of her name in whispered moments. Every gesture was a negotiation with grief, a way to keep the memory alive while attempting to navigate the aftermath of delayed resolution. Detectives continued to examine the case from multiple angles, aware that their work extended beyond the courtroom. Every detail had been scrutinized, yet each reflection revealed more to consider. They reviewed procedural choices, investigative decisions, and timelines with the clarity of hindsight, searching for lessons in both success and failure. The work reminded them that cold cases were not static. They evolved alongside advances in technology, changes in society, and the persistent murmur of human memory. The defendant's life had shifted irrevocably, contained now within the confines of a correctional facility. The town's perception of him oscillated between a man who had evaded justice for decades and a symbol of the fragility of ordinary life when intersected by violence. Friends and acquaintances struggled to reconcile the person they had known with the actions for which he had been convicted. The dissonance left a lasting impression, a reminder that evil can hide in plain sight, sometimes for decades, undetected even by those closest to it. Public discourse extended beyond the immediate community. Journalists, legal scholars, and law enforcement agencies examined the case as an exemplar of the potential and limitations of delayed justice. Panels and conferences dissected the intersection of forensic innovation and historical evidence, analyzing how technology could resurrect truth from the shadow of time. Ethical considerations, procedural challenges, and psychological ramifications were debated extensively, illustrating the broader significance of a case rooted in a small Texas town, yet resonating across professional and social landscapes. Local conversations remained tinged with the past, subtle yet persistent. Cafes, markets, and workplaces echoed with recollections and speculation. Older residents recounted their memories of that summer night, often with vivid detail, while younger residents tried to understand the significance of events they had only encountered in fragments, photographs, news articles, or whispered anecdotes. The town's collective consciousness became a tapestry of partial recollections, assumptions, and reflection, each thread contributing to a shared awareness that the past remained active and potent. The service road itself stood as a quiet, almost sentient observer. Its worn asphalt, lined with weeds, bore witness to both history and memory. Sunlight cast long shadows across its surface, wind shifted dust and debris, and occasional vehicles traversed it, unaware of its significance. Yet for those who knew every detail, the curve, the roadside vegetation, the faint remnants of old tire marks, was a reminder of a night that had shaped generations, a place where time had both paused and accelerated, holding secrets that even verdicts could not fully illuminate. Investigative reflection extended to considerations of memory and evidence over time. Witnesses' recollections, once crucial, were now understood through the lens of psychological research on memory decay and reconstruction. Investigators recognized that perception, emotion, and rumor had all influenced statements made decades ago. Forensics provided a bridge between historical uncertainty and contemporary precision, yet even the most advanced technology could not fully replicate human observation or fill gaps left by absent or altered memories. The town's social fabric was subtly reshaped by the case. Relationships, friendships, and neighborhood dynamics bore the imprint of fear, revelation, and reflection. Conversations were cautious, interactions measured, and the history of the case lingered in unspoken ways. The community had been forced to confront both the extraordinary presence of a hidden crime and the ordinary lives of those implicated, a juxtaposition that left emotional traces extending beyond the immediate parties involved. Media coverage, though less intense than during the trial, continued to influence perception. Documentaries, newspaper retrospectives, and legal analyses revisited the case periodically, emphasizing forensic breakthroughs, procedural diligence, and the human consequences of long-delayed justice. For residents, the repetition of narratives served both as validation and as a reminder of the fragility of closure. The story had entered cultural memory, shaping discourse beyond the physical boundaries of the town, ensuring that its impact would extend far into the future. Within law enforcement, the case became a touchstone for evaluating cold case methodologies. Protocols were updated, training programs re-examined, and archival practices refined. Investigators and administrators recognized the value of persistence, the importance of interdisciplinary collaboration, and the ethical responsibility to pursue justice across decades. The Texas case illustrated the delicate balance between patience and initiative, between technological potential and human limitation, providing a template for managing similarly complex investigations elsewhere. The psychological aftermath persisted alongside procedural reflections. Witnesses, family members, and residents grappled with residual trauma, reinterpreted memories, and evolving perceptions of risk and safety. Even after the court's ruling, the community carried a heightened awareness of the thin line separating ordinary life from extraordinary violence. This awareness influenced behavior subtly yet persistently, altering routines, shaping vigilance, and embedding itself into collective memory. The service road under the unrelenting Texas sun remained unchanged in physical form yet transformed in meaning. For locals, it was more than asphalt. It was a temporal marker, a threshold of memory, grief, and reflection. Every journey along it was an encounter with the past, whether conscious or unconscious, and its silent persistence reinforced the idea that while legal processes could adjudicate acts, they could not erase the lived consequences of those acts across decades. Finally, the town's story reflected the enduring tension between closure and ambiguity. Justice had been pursued, verdicts rendered, and sentences imposed, yet uncertainty lingered. Questions about memory, evidence, human behavior, and ethical responsibility persisted. The case had revealed that the past does not remain static, that time can both obscure and reveal, and that the pursuit of truth is a continuous, imperfect process. Residents and investigators alike were left to navigate the space between resolution and reflection, between knowledge and mystery, understanding that the echoes of a single night in 1982 could resonate across generations, shaping lives, behaviors, and communities in ways that would never be fully quieted. And so, as the Texas night stretched across highways and fields, as the wind swept through weeds lining the service road, and as the stars emerged one by one in a sky unchanged by human drama, the memory of 1982 lingered. The town moved forward, children grew, families aged, yet the past remained indelible and persistent, a testament to the power of memory, the pursuit of justice, and the inescapable imprint of a night that had begun as tragedy and continued as a living presence in the hearts, minds, and streets of all who remembered. Years had passed since the trial, yet the town never truly returned to normal. Time had moved forward as it always does, but it carried with it the weight of the past, an invisible gravity anchored to one stretch of Texas asphalt. The service road remained unchanged in appearance, cracked in places, lined with scrubby weeds, carrying dust in the summer heat, but it was no longer just a road. It had become a marker of memory, a place where ordinary life and unspeakable tragedy intersected. Residents drove past with caution, some avoiding it entirely, some staring longer than necessary, compelled to confront the night that had changed everything. The road itself seemed to breathe with the stories it held, patient, silent, unyielding. The victim's family continued to live under the shadow of memory. Each day brought reminders of what had been lost, of what could never be recovered. Even after decades of waiting and a trial that ended in conviction, grief remained unyielding. Mornings began quietly, with rituals of remembrance, photographs, candles, and whispered names. Nights ended in reflection, haunted by the gaps between memory and reality, by the knowledge that 40 years of absence could never truly be made whole. The conviction, though a measure of justice, was never enough to quiet the ache, to fill the empty spaces left by the life taken too soon. For law enforcement, the case had become a cornerstone of procedural reflection. Detectives and administrators studied each decision, each line of inquiry, each missed opportunity, and each successful breakthrough. They understood that cold cases required more than skill. They demanded persistence, patience, and the willingness to challenge the limits of both human memory and technological capability. The lessons learned in the Texas investigation were shared widely, influencing training, protocols, and approaches to long unsolved crimes. The case became a testament to the delicate balance between human intuition and forensic science, between the patience of decades and the urgency of justice. The defendant, now years into his sentence, remained a silent presence in the narrative. His life was confined, monitored, and reduced to routine, yet his shadow stretched far beyond prison walls. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances struggled with the dissonance of the man they had known. A neighbor, co-worker, ordinary figure, and the man convicted of murder decades later. The cognitive dissonance unsettled the community, illustrating the uncomfortable truth that evil can coexist with the ordinary, that danger can remain hidden in plain sight, and that appearances are often unreliable. The town itself was altered in subtle, persistent ways. Residents navigated their daily routines with a quiet awareness, a recognition that violence had once passed among them unnoticed, that ordinary roads could conceal extraordinary acts. Conversations were careful, relationships sometimes tentative, and trust reevaluated against the backdrop of memory. Even those who had arrived after 1982 absorbed the weight of the story, inheriting the collective consciousness of a town shaped by tragedy and delayed justice. Media attention persisted intermittently. Documentaries revisited the case, news outlets analyzed procedural lessons, and legal scholars discussed the ethical complexities of delayed prosecution. Images of the service road, photographs of the victim, and faded portraits of the defendant were circulated again and again, embedding the story further into cultural memory. While coverage waned from the intensity of the trial, it never disappeared entirely, serving as a reminder that some events refused to fade. Psychologically, the case reshaped understanding of trauma, memory, and resilience. Witnesses and residents reflected on the fragility of human recollection, on the distortions that decades can bring, and on the persistence of unresolved grief. Memories were revisited, reinterpreted, and often relived, illustrating that justice and closure exist on different planes. While the legal system could provide answers, it could not fully reconcile the emotional and social consequences of violence. The service road under the expansive Texas sky remained an unchanging witness. Sunlight and shadow played across its surface, wind stirred dust and debris, and vehicles passed over it daily, unaware of the history beneath their tires. To those who knew, however, it was a threshold, a liminal space where ordinary life met the extraordinary. It represented absence, presence, memory, and the persistent question of how justice can intersect with time. Each journey along it, deliberate or incidental, was a confrontation with both past and present. Academic and professional communities continued to study the case, drawing lessons in forensics, criminal justice, and human behavior. Panels discussed how delayed prosecutions interact with witness reliability, evidence preservation, and the moral dimensions of justice. Psychological studies examined the impact of unresolved trauma over decades, while legal analyses focused on procedural challenges and ethical considerations. The Texas case, though local in origin, became a template for understanding the broader implications of cold cases, influencing practices far beyond the borders of the town where it all began. For families of other victims, the case sparked cautious hope. They submitted evidence, encouraged authorities to revisit long-dormant files, and watched closely for precedent. The notion that time could be challenged, that truth could be pursued even decades later, inspired action and reinforced the necessity of diligence. Yet the case also reminded them that answers, while sought, might remain partial, incomplete, and emotionally complicated. The town, in quiet moments, reflected on the limits of resolution. Justice had been administered, yet the emotional, social, and psychological echoes of 1982 persisted. The community had been forced to confront the hidden complexities of human behavior, the persistence of memory, and the fragility of safety. Life moved forward, children grew, new residents arrived. Yet the events of that summer night remained etched into the fabric of the town, influencing perception, action, and understanding. The road, the asphalt, the weeds, the silence, they bore witness as they had for decades. Sun and wind, dust and shadow, all carried the memory forward. Legal resolutions, while critical, could not erase the lived consequences, the grief, or the collective awareness that something extraordinary had occurred, forever shaping the town's identity. In the end, the Texas cold case illustrated the persistence of truth and the persistence of memory. It showed that justice, while attainable, is rarely absolute, and that the human experience of loss, fear, and uncertainty transcends verdicts and sentences. Even after decades, even after legal closure, the past continues to exert influence, shaping communities, families, and individuals in ways both visible and invisible. As night fell over Texas, stars emerging above highways and backroads, the echoes of 1982 whispered across the land. The service road remained silent, yet it spoke in ways that no words could fully capture. The town moved forward, children played, families lived, yet all carried with them the imprint of a single night, a single act, and the unrelenting truth that time, while it may pass, never truly erases what has been witnessed. Memory persists. Justice persists. And some questions, no matter how long the years, never fully disappear.